Hello and welcome to another episode of Jack of All Trades. I'm your host, Jack Allen, and today we're traveling to Carnegie to the Thomas Espy Post, and we're going to take a tour with our guide, Diane, and I think you'll like this. It's very interesting. Well, I'm with Diane Kleinfelter, and she's agreed to give us a little tour of the Espy Post. And the reason that it came about was on Memorial Day, we always do our ceremony at the cemetery, and there's quite a few Espys buried in there and some others. And Diane has graciously agreed to show us the Civil War Post, which is in downtown Carnegie, and it sits on top of the hill. And we thank you for meeting with us today to go over some things. So just tell a little bit about yourself, how you got involved.
Okay. I actually am retired from being the library director here at the Andrew Carnegie Free Library. And I was also the curator for this Espy Post during my tenure here. Now I'm just a volunteer. But welcome to the Captain Thomas Espy Post, 153 of the Grand Army of the Republic. And if you are familiar with VFW posts
Sure.
today,
Yes.
well, the Grand Army of the Republic, or GAR, was very similar in nature. It was a fraternal benefit society that was formed in 1866 in Decatur, Illinois, actually, and then spread. But this particular post was chartered in 1879. And of course, Carnegie didn't exist at that time. And so the post met in various places, but they were renting. When Carnegie came into being in 1894, that is when talks began about building the library.
Okay.
The library opened in 1901, and the members from the Espy Post came up to talk to the trustees about being given some space in the library. They were getting older and dying off, and they wanted their artifacts and manuscripts preserved. So they were given this room, and they moved in here in 1906.
Okay.
The way you see it today is the way that it looked when they met here.
So this is the actual first post, other than different house to house or different meeting places.
Correct.
This is the original post also then.
Yes, yes. They moved in here, and the last one died in 1938.
Okay.
And when that happened, the Board of Trustees decided to lock it up. You know, it was, I don't think they knew what to do with everything that was in here, but the agreement that was signed with the Post was that we would take care of their room and take care of everything in it.
Okay.
And we didn't do a very good job. The room was, the whole library was in a state of disrepair. The roof had been leaking. So all of the crown molding that you see here, that's actual plaster. And when plaster gets wet, it crumbles.
Sure.
So, and then on top of the crown molding is what's called corps badges, which were, ways to determine what regiment and company and brigade and corps, like the regimental flags. That's what those symbols meant.
Okay.
But they had all fallen down because the plaster crumbled. And they were originally encased in glass, and the glass was broken. So they met here until 1938, and we We have their entire manuscript collection. You know, the completed membership applications, the biographies of deceased members. I mean, every check that they wrote.
Yeah,
we
so,
have
so it
record
was a
of it.
social hall then for
It was.
Civil War veterans.
We tend to forget that there were no social safety nets back then. You know, there was no Veterans Administration, no Social Security. So they depended on one another to help each other out. And part of the dues that they paid for membership in this post went into a common kitty.
Okay.
And if a member, his wife was sick and he needed a doctor to come and he didn't have the money to pay the doctor, the post would help him out.
Okay.
But it was a social gathering. They could network together.
Any idea of how many members they might have had? Is that written anywhere?
We are working on completing a list. It's probably more than 250.
Well,
I mean,
that's a
we
lot.
have, you can go on our website, carnegie.org, and under the Civil War tab, you can get to our digitized collection. And we have put all of the membership applications that we have. You can go online and see who's there. But we have many more members that, for whatever reason, the membership application didn't survive. So we're going through the minutes right now and trying to extract those names too.
Okay. So it opened in 1906, and the last member passed away in 1938,
Yes.
and then
It was locked up for over 50 years. They had taken the glass door to the room off, put a solid wooden door on, and padlocked it. And it remained closed for over 50 years.
so everything was here in
A
1938.
virtual time capsule when people came in. It was opened in the 1980s
Okay.
for a look-see every once in a while, but it was in bad shape.
And then who made the decision one day to say, we should open this again for historical purposes?
Well, we were approaching the sesquicentennial of the Civil War, and we had a board member who contributed to the initial restoration because it was always part of our capital campaign to restore this room. But, you know, as he pointed out, you got to do it now.
Yeah.
You know, capture the limelight of the sesquicentennial. So we closed the room in February of 2009, and that on Abraham Lincoln's birthday. That was the last time that the room was open. People came in for a final tour. We had speaker in the music hall, and it was closed for a year.
Okay.
I had to take everything out of this room and put it into secure storage.
So when you opened it in the late 80s, that's exactly how it was when they closed it 50 years prior. So
Yes.
people would walk in and whatever was here, and they would just
Right.
to go through it. And then you decided that we need to refurbish the whole thing.
Correct.
Okay.
And it was closed for a year, reopened on Abraham Lincoln's birthday in 2010.
Okay.
And the way it is now is the way it was when they met here. We have a catalog that was published in 1911 by the veterans. And it's a listing of everything that's in this room. So we have an inventory. But what was particularly useful to us in the restoration were these pictures. This is the way the room looked in 1911. Of course, being black and white,
Yeah.
we didn't know what color the walls were because there was no paint left on the walls,
Oh, wow.
nothing. And when the plaster had gotten wet, it was like white, chalky stuff on the walls. But they took a chunk of plaster from behind one of the radiators and sent it out for analysis. And this is the color, the original
So
color.
they were able to determine
Yes.
what the color actually was.
Yes, they were. And I was surprised because I figured it would just be white or beige.
Sure.
You know. But what's interesting is that the architects were able to pick up from these pictures the very faint stenciling on the ceiling. There was no evidence of a stencil on the ceiling. And knowing the dimensions of those core badges up there, they knew how wide those were. They said, oh, well, these leaves are like 2.5 inches wide. So they were able to replicate the exact stencil that was there at the time. We have in storage quite a few artifacts that need restoration, especially our fabrics. We have a jacket that belonged to Captain Espy, and that's Thomas Espy's picture there in his militia uniform. And so those kinds of things need restored. We have gone through all of the manuscript collection, and that's all stored in acid-free materials now, so there's no more deterioration of that. So as we get the money to be able to restore those things, they will be added to the room.
I did mention to you that we have a banner program in Bethel Park where we have about 500 banners that are scattered through the municipality with veterans on. Mm-hmm. And one of the veterans that we have on one of our banners is Thomas Espy. Mm-hmm. We're still checking to see how it got there initially. Did the Legion have a picture? Obviously someone had a picture, and that's why it's on a banner, but
Correct.
it was pretty nice seeing the name, not really knowing anything about him. Mm-hmm. So can you tell us a little bit about who Thomas Espy was?
Sure. He was a grist mill merchant that lived in St. Clair Township, and he was rather old to be going into the Civil War, but he was the captain of a local militia called the St. Clair Guards. And when Abraham Lincoln called for 75,000 volunteers from the states, Captain Espy volunteered his militia. And they were inducted into Company H of the 62nd Pennsylvania Volunteer Infantry. And a GAR post could not be named for anybody that was living. Captain Espy died from wounds that he received at the Battle of Gaines Mills in June of 1862. He was taken into a Confederate hospital where he died, and the Confederates buried him. And there's no record of where he was buried. So the tombstone that you see at Bethel Presbyterian Church is for him, but he's not actually there.
Yeah, it's amazing because, there are quite a few Espys there, mm-hmm. and we know of Thomas, and we know that the tombstone was there, and people were saying he is there, he's not there.
Right, no,
but now we know for sure that he's not in our cemetery.
He's not there. And I have 2 volunteers for the room that actually are descended from Thomas Espy. And they have both meticulously researched his life and gone through the official records to see if there was any mention of where he was buried, but there isn't.
Now, are those are Espys from the Bethel Park area?
Yes, I believe.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And we did notice reading an article that serving with Captain Espy was the Couches. Mm-hmm. And we have Fort Couch Road there, and and then also the Fifes. There's a lot of Fifes that are in the Bethel Cemetery also.
Yes.
So he passed away as a POW, and usually you don't think of a POW in the United States. It's like, oh, that's right. There were 2 distinct armies. So now, just a little bit about different things that you have in here, if you can point out a few, and we'll take pictures and so on, but some of the things that we don't want to miss.
Sure. I would start with the cannonballs in the lower cabinet there. When the room was opened in the 1980s, they discovered that there was live ammunition in this room.
Oh, wow.
So they called the Pittsburgh Bomb Squad out, and they removed everything, including shells that we had. So recently, and I'm not sure what year this was, they were working in Lawrenceville down by the Arsenal.
Okay.
Digging ground, they were building a new building. And they uncovered buried cannonballs that were live. So they stopped, construction, called the bomb squad in, and they actually wound up taking over 2,000 cannonballs out to a military camp in the middle of the state. I can't think of the name. But prior to that, they had called and said, would you like some of these? And I said, absolutely. They said, okay, we'll defuse them and we'll bring them back. So those are not the original ones that were here.
Okay.
Those are from when they decommissioned the arsenal.
Okay.
They buried all that
But
ammunition
still
there.
Civil War cannonballs?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. The Arsenal was one of the biggest makers of cannonballs during the Civil War,
Okay.
right here in Pittsburgh. Hmm. So that's a favorite one. This other one up here, that canteen, that was retrieved by a member of the Espy Post when he went to a reunion down in Petersburg. And that was originally in a pine tree outside of Robert E. Lee's headquarters during the battle. But it's not a Confederate canteen, it's a Union canteen.
Okay.
So
Someone was spying on them.
either they were spying on them, or it was a Confederate that had picked up a Union canteen off the battlefield and was
Okay.
up in that tree, maybe guarding, maybe he was a sharpshooter, and just hung it in the tree and forgot about it.
Yeah. And the two uniforms that you have?
That is a replica. This is an original. The one in the left of the cabinet here was an original. The National Park Service came to take a closer look at that. I guess that's kind of rare. And so we allowed them to take it out of the cabinet. They put some tissue paper down, they laid it down on the desk, and they opened it up. And all of those buttons are stamped on the back. It says Tiffany and Company. So it was an officer's uniform that
Okay.
he paid to have made, and got his buttons from Tiffany's. Now, that is a replica, and that belonged to a member of the 9th Pennsylvania Reserve. These are reenactors. And he was an archivist at Carnegie Mellon. And he was one of the people that came in very early on in the 1980s, realized what we had here, and was able to start putting stuff into preservation. He died, and his estate was selling off his stuff, so we
Okay.
bought that jacket to have him
Yeah.
part of the room.
And the flag that are between the uniforms?
That is a replica of Captain Thomas Espy's militia, which was called the St. Clair Guards.
Okay.
We have the original of that flag as well as the original of these flags. This was the Thomas Espy Post GAR flag that they would have carried in parades.
And I did notice that at one time, since you mentioned similar to VFW in its day, that there were 7,000 GAR posts throughout the country, which is obviously a lot smaller. But now there's just a handful left.
That's right. By 1900, there was over 7,000 of these posts all across the United States.
Right.
And this is one of maybe a dozen,
Yeah.
but it's been documented as being the most preserved and the most intact
Okay.
because of it being locked up for over 50 years.
And I was just thinking, if the Carnegie didn't, give the room to use this, and they just went from house to house or rent,
Right.
Where would this stuff be now?
It would be lost to time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. There were regulations when a GAR post was going to disband, that what they were supposed to do with their stuff. but
Sure.
They all didn't do it. There's some things at the Pennsylvania Archives, and there is a Grand Army of the Republic Museum near Philadelphia,
Okay.
and they have quite a few things
Okay.
there.
And again, there's a lot of things here.
Well, I was going to mention to you that we have a sword over there. In researching that sword, it was an officer who was killed in battle, and his friend who had enlisted with him picked the sword up, intending to return it to his parents who lived here in Pittsburgh. And he was killed. But the sword eventually made its way back. It was Adams Express Company, shipped it back to the parents, who refused to pay the postage due on their dead son's sword. So it was sold at an auction. And when the Espy Post opened here and they heard about somebody up in Franklin buying the
Okay.
sword, they went up with money in hand and said, "We want that sword for our room." Well, I couldn't imagine anybody refusing
Yeah, right.
their son's sword. And it turns out that they were Confederate sympathizers, which is like, this is Pittsburgh. I can
And it's-
understand if it was, in Maryland maybe, one of the border states, but this was Pittsburgh, and that's why they refused the postage. And doing some further research on that family after the father died, the mother filed for a federal pension based on her son's service, and she got the money.
So I know there's the furniture in here. Are these originals?
Yes, this is all original. We're minus a few chairs. I don't know what happened to them. They disappeared over the years, but yes, this is all original. The only thing in this room that isn't original, other than the one uniform, is that drum. And that belonged to Captain Espy. That was his militia drum, so that actually predates the Civil War. It was
Okay.
manufactured in 1855.
Wow.
Yeah. The other thing I'd just like to point out is the photograph that we have that was taken on the steps of the library. Those men assembled here in 1904. That was 2 years prior to their moving into this room.
Okay.
But the occasion was Memorial Day, which was a holiday because of the Grand Army of the Republic. So they met here. You can come up those very steps, and that's the steps that the men were standing on. And they had lunch here by the women of the Carnegie Monday Club. And the original of that photograph is at the Carnegie Historical Society.
Okay.
That particular photograph was donated to the room when they moved in here in 1906 by the Carnegie Elks.
Okay.
They got a hold of the original and they had it blown up, and they airbrushed out the women that could be seen in the original of the photograph that were in the upper right-hand window. And those were the women that were given them
Yeah.
lunch. But they airbrushed those women
Oh,
out.
things have
And
changed.
they also put in a few heads of men that were not here when the photograph
They're
was taken in
photoshopping back then.
Exactly. Yeah, I think by 1906, a few men said, hey, I'm a member of that post.
Yeah.
I want my picture in there. So if you look real closely from beneath, you can see where they pasted in heads. If you look closely at the photograph, you will see that there are African Americans in that photograph, which was quite unusual for 1904.
Sure.
This was an integrated post, which was almost unheard of. If they could, if they had enough people interested in membership, all black, they preferred that. But there are at least 3 African Americans in that photo. We know the identity of one of them,
Okay.
and that was Jonathan Greenidge, and he served in the 8th United States Colored Troops. In fact, we have his rifle. His family donated his rifle to us.
Now, most of the people that are in the photograph are in proximity to Carnegie, I would think.
Yes. Post tended to open and attract members from a
Right.
Now, when Soldiers and Sailors opened in 1910, and that's the architect's drawing of Soldiers and
Okay,
Sailors in
yep.
Oakland. When that opened in 1910, many of the 28 Grand Army of the Republic posts in Allegheny County started meeting there. So, but not the SB post, because it was already opened in 1906 here.
Right.
But they have a good many of their records of the posts that met there.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about it. You could probably, because that's an amazing hall as it is, and I would imagine it would have a lot of Civil War.
Yes, that initially was open to honor the close to 26,000 veterans of the Civil War from Allegheny County.
Okay.
Of course, they've added, wars on.
26,000.
26,000. Pennsylvania provided the second largest number of volunteers after New York.
Well, it was very interesting.
Thank you.
We thank you for giving us time to do this. Now, how can residents come down here to view the room itself?
The room is open every Saturday, free of charge, between 11 and 3.
Okay.
And there is a volunteer here who would be glad to give you a
Let
tour.
you know what you're looking at.
If you can't make it on Saturdays, by appointment during the week,
Okay.
if you call the library, especially like people have guests from out of town and they want to come to bring them here, maybe do lunch in Carnegie.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome,
We've
Jack.
enjoyed it.
Thank you. I always enjoy talking about the SB Post.
Absolutely. And now we can put this post to a name from Bethel Park.
Exactly.
So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Well, I hope you enjoyed our show today. It was very informative. I learned more about the Civil War, I think, today than I knew. And it's right here in Carnegie. Again, as Diane mentioned, they are open on weekends for tours. I would highly recommend any resident come down here to take a look at this historic site.